I say to my wife a line, they're a match made in heaven living in Gehenna. They're two peas in a pod, but they don't know how to live together. They don't know how to relate to each other. And much of, I would say 80% of the divorces we see today are that. Not that they're mismatched, not that they're not aligned, but they don't know how to live together. They don't know how to create the bond of love. They don't know how to be married properly. So,
welcome back to a very special episode of That's an Issue. So until now, you've been hearing from two kinds of people. You've been hearing from specialists, psychologists, and mental health professionals, and you've been hearing from people who've had a journey. They've gone through some incredible feat to get over some challenge in the mental health world that they've experienced. And now we're doing something that we haven't done yet. We're talking to a rabbi, someone who's been there, out there, and has so much experience. So I picked up a book in the Svarim store from Rabbi Bentzion Shafier, who is known very widely for being the creator of the Shmuz. And he has incredible lessons, lectures, videos, all the sorts. He's been doing this since the early 2000s. He's way ahead of his time. And he came out with a book talking about the really dumb, stupid things that couples do or don't do. And fascinating. We knew right away. I got in touch with Zevi Kaufman, who hooked us up with him. Like, okay, we have to talk to him. And this episode is incredible because Rabbi Shafier has actual practical advice and so many good anecdotes and lessons from people he's seen along the way or try to help along the way. This episode, you're going to be hearing about, let's say you're going through a problem and you need a psychologist and you don't know who to call. Well, we know who you could call. It's Relief. You'll hear more about them in this week's episode. Now, the Kletchik's conversation with Rabbi Shafier.
Mental health, relationships, those are loaded topics and something that affects every part of our lives. But we aren't having enough open conversations about it.
And that's an issue. Okay, welcome Rabbi Shafier to the podcast.
thank you.
For our audience, could you describe what it is that you do?
So, once upon a time, a long time ago, I had an honest job. I was a high school rebbe, and my rebbe, the Yeshiva Zatzal, asked me to start a program for the working guy. He felt there was nothing out there for the young working guy, so I started the Shmuz, which was, again, that sort of program, Hashkafa Musar for working guys. And
was it online at that time? Meaning, I don't know how far back we're going, but
2003.
Recently,
meaning the Shmuz, like, did it start as an actual Shmuz in person?
It started actually live, human beings, one human being talking to other human beings.
Wow, what
I
a
know,
concept.
it's interesting enough, to one of the first Shmuz, and this fellow comes over and he says, you know what I want to do? I want to videotape. You know, the Shmuz are very good. I want to videotape them, and then I'm going to put it on the internet. I said, what? Anyway, his name is Shimon Kol Yaakov, and the Shmuz was one of the first on Torah Anytime. And since that time, he's become, well, as you know, Torah Anytime has become a huge, huge phenomenon. And so we were there back in 2000, and that was 2004 or 5, somewhere in that range.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the Shmuz, what were the Shmuzim? How do you say that?
Yeah.
About? Were they about relationships? Like what?
No. So the Shmuz really is any topic that a thinking from person should be dealing with. That means to say davening, emunah, bitachon, certainly a lot to do with relationships in the sense of ben adam l'chaveru. But initially, most of the guys coming were not married. So the idea of talking about marriage was not even a subject.
So it was single guys who weren't in full-time yeshiva,
right,
and you were like an address for them to learn.
Right. And really, and not just learn, because it was really dealing with issues that everyone assumes you should have learned in yeshiva, but no one does. In other words, why does Hashem want us to do this? Why does Hashem create us? What life's about, meaning behind things. So a lot of times guys would have these like aha moments, like, wow, I never knew that. I never realized that. So it became very inspiring, and it became a very, the original Shmuzim were a lot of fun. It was a really tight group of guys. And I would go from Brooklyn to Muncie to Queens. And then we added Lakewood, then we added Baltimore. At a certain point when my kids no longer knew my name, I said it was time to slow this down a little bit, but but it was a lot of fun in those days. But mostly single guys. Then the guys started getting married, and the issues started coming up, and issues became deeper, and etc. But that's fast forwarding a little bit.
Got it. So you, at this point, you help people and with relationships.
It's a small part of what I do. Yes.
Got
Yes.
it.
Wait, what else do you do? 'Cause-
Okay, that's a good question. What else do I do? So, really, what I do full time is the Shmuz. I don't do it for a living. Thank God we have a family business. But the Shmuz deals with all of life issues that a thinking from person should be dealing with. So, again, right now, marriage is something that's become much more of a topic because there's been so many issues and so many problems. And so I sort of focus on it a little bit, but I don't do this, what I do full time is hashkafa, musar, both developing the content as well as dealing with people who have issues and problems. Call me up, a lot of the time is spent just, counseling, etc.
Okay. So your people are coming to you for help in your role as a rabbi.
Hopefully as a rabbi.
Right, as a rabbi. And then a lot of that is relationship.
So now
Advice.
A lot of it is the past 15 years, more and more has been marriage because, again, that's become, it used to be a man met a woman, hopefully fell in love, hopefully got married, stayed married, and it was, had 1.5 kids and a dog, what the white picket fence home. That's no longer the world we live in, especially the past 10 years. So of late, marriage has become more and more of an issue that I deal with. So, hence the book, hence the focus.
Got it. So I'd love to jump into that.
Yeah. Can I ask the first most
Go,
obvious
go,
question? Why do you think that is? Why has it changed?
Right. So it's a good question. A lot of it has to do with, sort of once you open the door is open. In other words, meaning there's a certain adjustment that any couple needs. There's just the simple reality that there are gender differences, personality differences, temperament differences. So take two human beings who are different and ask them to share their lives is very difficult. But take two human beings who have opposite genders with different approaches, different outlooks, different values, and ask them to share life. It's very difficult. Now, there's always an adjustment period in any marriage, no matter how much aligned they are, no matter how moderate both are, no matter how good they are as people, there's always an adjustment. Now, when there was no open door, a lot of couples did the adjustment that they had to do, as difficult as it was. Not all marriages succeeded. There were a lot of bad marriages that they remained married, but many couples sort of learned to adjust. They learned to get along better. What has happened is we've grown up in a very, very pampered society. Everyone's expectations has become extremely, extremely demanding. There's very little tolerance for others. There's certainly very little. There's also a lot of emotional instability and a lot of reasons. There's a lot of reasons, but
right.
But
So where does that come from, though? Meaning the pampering, the pampered society. Why do we have a pampered society?
Look,
the parents are pampering the kids.
Look, I'm not going to date myself over here, folks, but I grew up in a home that's about a third of the size that my children's home is. You know what I mean? I grew up in Kion Hills in a tiny little home. We live in Muncie in a huge. My father, he was born in Berlin, and people scrape by, and Baruch Hashem, now we have so much wealth, so much abundance, and it's a bracha that's beyond description. But with that also comes a certain opulence, a certain wealth. There's an extremely self-centeredness to our, to kids growing up today they also don't have much emotional resilience. You see kids today, there's such an emotional fragility. There's so little resilience. There's so little. I didn't come here for the psychological piece of this, but the bottom line is, there's divorce is an opportunity, is an open door. Once it's an open door, I'm out the door fast and fast. We come from a very pampered, very what's in it for me sort of society. So immediately the marriage isn't meeting my needs, I'm out the door. You're also dealing with a lot of people who are emotionally not wholesome. And I don't think we ever had anywhere near the amount of unwholesome people that we see today. So, it's a combination of a number of factors, but they all sort of converge on this certain reality that divorce is just out the door. And
you don't think that's a good idea?
Wait till the end of Shabbat brachas at least.
No, because I'm saying is I did read some of your book. I read and I listened to a lot of it. Mm-hmm. And some of the things I just, I wonder, if we have the correct, meaning a lot of the things that you say in the book, and I'm just wondering how how you process marriage. Where are you getting the concept of what marriage is from? Are we drawing it from, let's say, religious base, society base, and and I have follow-up questions, so I'll just start with that. That's
Okay.
my opening.
Okay, so I hope that everything that I speak about, everything that I write about, comes from a 100% Torah base. Now, oftentimes, it's understanding the Torah and applying it to our times that requires some secular knowledge, some awareness of the world, some awareness of what we as people experience and live with. But I certainly hope, and I certainly focus on it being as authentic Torah-based values as possible.
Right. So, the concept of love, right, and the way that we say love, right, in American culture, I think that differs vastly than what the Torah deems, and a lot of what.
And may I disagree?
Yeah.
And your wife will also
really?
disagree.
Is it so different?
Meaning
Why
there's
is
a
it
lot
so different?
because I think that there's for sure. I mean, I think that the way that a Westernized culture views marriage is different than what marriage was back in the day.
Did you go to yeshiva?
Yes.
That's the problem.
The problem with what?
That's the problem.
With
In other words, unfortunately, our yeshivas are doing a horrible job at educating much of what life is about. And certainly this issue that a couple are supposed to be having an ongoing love affair. There's supposed to be real vibrant love in the marriage, attachment. There's supposed to be somehow in yeshiva that's like neglected. I don't know why.
why are you assuming that is the case?
Only because I see it all the time, and
No,
only
no.
because of your remarks.
No, but I'm what I'm
Well,
saying
what
is
do you feel you learned is the Torah view on marriage? Why don't we start with that, and then we could compare it to the Western view?
well, I want to know what you want to know what I think.
Yeah, because you're the one who said it was different.
That's funny. I just think it's very in a Westernized culture. It's very romanticized, right? A lot of it's very clear that throughout the Torah biblical history is people had more than one wife, right?
Okay,
So-
I got to stop you for 1 second. So
I feel like you want.
I got to jump in.
You
on
gotta
that.
jump
Okay,
in.
I got it. Okay.
Yeah.
I have a line. I think it's accurate. Hollywood got it 100% right, but backwards. In the world of Hollywood, we fall in love, we get married, we fall out of love, we get unmarried. Love comes, love goes. Mystery of man. From a Torah perspective, we don't get married for love. I marry this person because I believe that Hashem has determined this is the perfect match for me. This is the right one. But that's the determination factor. But once I'm married, if you're not building a vibrant bond of love and attachment, if you're not constantly creating that love in your marriage, you're going to be in very, very hot water. Your marriage is going to be very, very difficult. In other words, meaning to say, what Hollywood got it wrong about is, you see, the love in the marriage is the glue. That's what keeps a couple together. That's not romanticized from Western civilization. That's not a Hollywood concept. That's a Torah-based concept. That's very real. The Maral says that Avram and Sarah had the closest connection, the closest bond of any two human beings. The closest little connection that any other human, closer than any other human beings. Now that, again, it's something in yeshiva we don't focus on. For some reason, it's not taught. Now, again, I was a high school rebbe for 15 years, so I know what was taught and what wasn't. And I would hack the guys when they were 17. I had 11th graders, and I would talk to them about marriage. I'd say, Rebbe, we're 17. What do you? I'd say, don't learn about it when you're walking down the chuppah. The time to learn about it is now. But again, I
want to be very clear. I don't believe that I'm not. I shouldn't be that way. Just as for the record, I was just saying that
your wife is sitting next to you.
Yeah, exactly. For the record, put it very clear. After reading the book and after understanding the premise of how and then how to fix that by doing certain things, and then, for example, even saying that, let's say divorce is not an appropriate place to, you said now that you shouldn't be getting divorced.
Well, never.
No. I didn't say that at all. I said divorce is way more common than it should be. There are definitely situations and times, as Masechah Gittin written for a reason.
Right.
And there are situations where, and again, I've dealt with couples where they get to a point where they have to be divorced. The problem is I also deal with couples on a regular basis, on a regular ongoing basis. I say to my wife a line, they're a match made in heaven living in Gehenna. They're two peas in a pod, but they don't know how to live together. They don't know how to relate to each other. And much of, I would say 80% of the divorces we see today are that. Not that they're mismatched, not that they're not aligned, but they don't know how to live together. They don't know how to create the bond of love. They don't know how to be married properly. So there are three pillars to a successful marriage: commitment, love, and learning to live together. Commitment comes from knowing that this is the one that Hashem determined is a perfect match for me. That part requires fortification, requires think about. Love is this part of the bond, the connection, and there are many tools for that. It's a third part that get a lot of couples into trouble, the learning to live together. Now, learning to live together is maybe something you're more comfortable with because of your yeshiva deficit. I apologize for calling it that, but
I can't believe I was ever called the yeshiva deficit.
You were educated. By the way, it's even worse on the women's side. We'll get to that in a minute. But sometimes the Beis Yaakovs teach things that are anyway. So the problem is, I agree wholeheartedly that even if there's very real commitment and there's very real love in the marriage, you still have to learn to live together because that's a very real part of a successful marriage. And there is a lot more from a yeshiva perspective. I think many people are more comfortable with understanding that that's the part where things go wrong. And it is true that there's a lot of work to be done in that area. But I think all three pillars are essential, and any one of them that's missing and the house falls down. So it's three pillars. It's commitment, love, and learning to live together that spell the success of marriage or the failure. We're not going to change the pampered generation. We're not going to change the divorce rate. We're not going to change any of the emotional fragility. We're not going to change that. What we can change is the other three parts. First of all, the perspective, the education about what a marriage is about. Meaning, the young couple will come into marriage expecting everything's going to be great. I fell in love and now I'm going to be madly, passionately in love forever and ever. And it's going to be all roses. They're in for a rude awakening. So there's an educational piece, I think, that's huge that can make a tremendous, tremendous difference. Understanding what a relationship needs, that it requires a lot of work. Everyone knows marriage needs work. So what does that mean? Ask a young fella, what does marriage work? Marriage needs work. What does it mean? I don't know. You work on it. What does that mean? So I'll ask you, for the fun of it, what does it mean to work in a marriage? And your wife is over here. Oh, there's a bad.
You're asking me.
Bad.
I'm in a hot seat tonight.
Yeah. We got to switch
I tapped
chairs.
the book early.
I
went after the book.
Big mistake.
What does it mean to work on your marriage?
What does it mean to work on my... Well, first of all, my marriage doesn't need any work. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
That's one, just for the record.
I'll ask your wife after.
What I would say is you have to work on yourself and you have to work on your ability to communicate and be a better person and making the other person happy.
Okay, so now that's a huge... I can't disagree with anything you said. I agree wholeheartedly. And your wife is shaking her head, so I'm sure
I like
we're...
that.
I like that. Okay.
That's right. Brownie points.
Yeah.
Boom.
So the problem is that if you come into marriage with that as the end all and be all, I think you're going to be in for a rude awakening. And many people come into marriage. Well, listen, I'm a nice person and she's a nice person and everything's going to be great. And then they get married and suddenly everything isn't great. And so here's the first piece that's missing from I think typically, well, let me start this way. The young man and young women who get married today are utterly, completely ignorant of the following. Number one, what does a relationship need? Meaning, in your perspective, even the idea of love probably isn't necessary in the marriage. At least, I don't know if we're having a serious discussion about that, but
No,
but
that's not what I said. No, I don't think. No,
He doesn't think it's not necessary. He didn't think that was Torah.
What I'm saying is that
Right.
it's a
By the way,
westernized.
can I
It's
say
a very
something though?
Western society
Let's go
view.
to different sides of the world.
Wait, did I get the right answer though with the to help a marriage? Did I
You
get
got
that?
part.
Yeah,
What was
part.
what's the correct answer?
So there are a lot of pieces. That's the problem. It's not just one little piece. There's in other words, again, number one, the love and the marriage, and that is not so simple at all because let's start with this. Men and women are fundamentally, radically different in approach, different in temperament, different in nature, different in desires, different in interests. When you take a man and a woman who are so different and put them together and ask them to live in peace and harmony, there's a lot of wisdom that goes into that. So when I say the love in the marriage, number one, the romantic piece is a huge, huge part of it. But let's jump over to the second part, the learning to live together piece. So the learning to live together piece, it becomes a real challenge because I live in my world. In my world, this is what I experience. And in my experiences, this is what's normal and rational and sane. And my spouse is just irrational. She just makes no sense. Why does she react that way? Why does she act? In fact, I have a little cute line. What are the two most important words in your marriage? That's a question. Two most important words in a marriage. You started by asking me real tough questions. So
Right. Yeah, I would say.
Like 2 words.
2 words.
How about 3?
Go ahead.
I love you. Boom.
I love you. It's very
Boom.
important.
Another brownie
What's
points.
2
All right,
words?
more-
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry is very
Okay.
good. By the way, the hardest words to say is I was wrong.
Right.
I know I was wrong. She knows I was wrong. I know she knows, but I can't say. But those are not the 2 most important words. I believe the 2 most important words in a marriage are the words, that's strange. When my wife does something that's so inexplicable, that's strange. When my husband does something that's cruel, cold, and callous, that's strange. I'll explain to you why. Almost every scientific discovery was preceded by an expression. Most people think the expression is, Eureka, I've discovered it. It's not true. Almost every scientific discovery was preceded by the expression, that's strange. Fellow mixed chemical X and chemical Y and got A. That's strange. That's how penicillin was discovered. That's how vulcanized rubber was discovered. Most scientific discoveries were preceded by the words, that's strange. The next time your husband or your wife does something that's really inexplicable, you say the words, that's strange. And what you do then is you open yourself up to the scientific curiosity of trying to understand their inner world. Why would a sane, rational woman respond that way? Why would a normally nice, kind, considerate guy act that way? When you say the words, that's strange, you open yourself up to discover their inner world, what makes them tick, what makes them, what their values are. But a quick caution, you say the words to yourself. You don't say it to your spouse because that ends very badly.
Or you're strange, right?
Or,
I want to be good.
no.
No, it's very interesting. Like you're making an observation versus making a judgment.
Exactly. Now, an observation means I'm observing. Now, let me understand. She's normally sane and rational. Why is she getting all bent out of shape? And that's strange. When I say that, I open myself up to understand her inner workings, understand her inner world, and suddenly I can climb into her emotional framework, into her emotional world. If I don't do that, forever, I don't understand her. She doesn't understand me. And we're just, and by the way, many, many couples don't have a fundamental understanding of why they react. And then we demonize. We use the phrases and the terms, whatever judgments we use. So the words, that's strange, are very important. So how do we get off on that? I don't know. But that's part of the learning to live together piece, by the way.
Right. Right.
You're
Okay.
saying, I think we were talking about what does it mean to work on a marriage?
Right.
I think that's where we.
Okay. So again, the first part, again, with all due respect, I know you didn't mean it this way, but this is a huge part, working on the love and the marriage. And by the way, I got to say this again, because Lakewood, New Jersey is probably the Shmuz is most popular there of any place in the world. Lakewood is the hotbed for the Shmuz. And I get up and I say things like, you have to, more than that, I say, gentlemen, it is your responsibility to romance your wife. You are responsible to plan the date. You are responsible for the love notes, the gifts, the cards. You are responsible to romance your wife. And the reactions I get are, what?
No, and I want to be very clear. I think that's good, and I'm not saying it's bad. My critique was that that's a westernized mahalach.
I disagree.
Right.
Meaning, I think
So
that
he's
that
saying no, it's not. You just.
I'm just saying you're doubling.
You had miseducation to think that
Why?
just because
Your yeshiva
that's
deficit.
part of Western, right? That means that it's not.
I don't think it's a
Torah.
bad
No,
thing. I don't
it
think
is
it's a
Torah.
bad thing.
But I'm saying it's not correct.
Like, where in the Torah does anyone buy anyone a rose or a ring?
What do you mean
So
jewelry? Yaakov buys jewelry.
That's
Yaakov
true, it
vayisa
was.
kol havayev. He
Eliezer
came-
brings jewelry.
One second. When Yaakov came empty-handed, one second,
course he
he's
does.
making faces. When Yaakov came empty-handed, vayisa kol havayev, he raised his voice crying. Rashi said for two reasons. One, he doesn't have a gift for the Kala. Two, they weren't going to be buried together. She was going to be buried not in Maris Machpelah. He cried. Do you know what that means? He cried. He raised his voice crying. Ooh. It was so, if you want to talk about romance, we're not buried together. Meaning we're supposed to be a couple together in life, in death together. We're not going to be buried together. That was one reason he cried. And the other reason he cried was he didn't have a gift for the Kala. Yaakov Avinu, a gift, and the Kala came. You know what I'm saying? But whatever. I'm not going to. I will not sit here debating.
I'm not. That's fine.
We'll open it if
It's
you
a
want.
good. It's a good schmooze.
If you want, we could debate it at some other point. But I think, see, this, and the reason why I say this is because in many, certainly in yeshivish circles, the idea, it sounds like it doesn't. It sounds Goyish. It's not Jewish. It's very Jewish. It's very Torah based. And I had a chance to be in my rebbe, the Shuz Zatzal's, proximity in their home, in their the love and respect that the Rebbetzin and Rosh Zatzal regarded each other with was just phenomenal. It was just iconic. It was just I can't even describe. Now you're right. I don't think the Rosh Zatzal took the Rebbetzin out bowling or out to but they spent time together as a couple. They were aligned, and a lot of things in the Torah are not done publicly. We don't public signs of this, PDAs. We don't do public displays of affection. That's for public. You don't do it. But if you don't do it in private, that's very sad. So I don't know. It's I think it's the issue of deficit. I'm sorry.
No,
Did he come into?
yeah, it's a pretty solid point.
But by the way, do you understand the problem? The problem is you're not alone in that.
No, again, I think it's a good Western piece
Right.
to incorporate.
So, but watch this. Let's say you're very frum, and I don't want anything Western in my life. Certainly not my family. Certainly not my marriage. So obviously, treating my wife, like the book says, the flowers and the notes and the gifts and come on, that's for goyim. That's Western civilization. Not for us B'nai Torah. We don't do that sort of stuff. And those marriages end up pretty rocky. So I think this educational piece is very important. But it's okay because it's not just the guys who don't know a lot of stuff. You know what the girls don't know?
No, I don't.
Okay, here we go. I don't know who teaches this, but if I could go on record and saying the Beis Shakas are doing a terrible job in this area. If you ask the average seminary girl, what does the word Ezer Kenegdo mean? Ezer Kenegdo. Ezer Kenegdo means mentor, rebbe, rebbitzin, policeman, lady. I mean, I'm responsible for the ruchnius of my husband. I have to make sure he gets to davening. I have to make sure he learns. I have to make sure that he's okay. Now, if you think I'm kidding, not only am I not kidding, I've seen this on a regular basis where I beg a woman, please stop trying to bully your husband into doing what you want. He doesn't want to. Just please stop it. It's not nice. And she says, well, my rebbe told me if I don't help my husband grow in ruchnius, I'm not being his Ezer Kenegdo. I'm not doing my job in life. So I've researched this. Now, again, I spent many years learning, and I was a rebbe for many years. And I researched the word Ezer Kenegdo amongst all the Rishonim, all the Achronim. I looked up every Chazal. I didn't see any source anywhere where it says be a mentor, policeman, lady, cop, mother. And you know what it means? It means support. What I call best friends who love each other. A support, a help. But if your husband says, I don't want you doing that, it's bothersome, it's annoying, please stop. So
It's like the water when you want to wake me up for chakras.
I shouldn't
You
pour water on
shouldn't-
your face.
No,
Okay,
it's
fine.
very annoying.
I used to wake up one of my kids with a water gun, but one of these water blasters. So one day he goes to sleep with a raincoat over his head.
Really?
Yeah, really.
That's awesome.
But
No, but it's true. Girls are taught that.
right, I'm responsible for
Yeah,
the
yeah.
ruchnius of my husband,
Yeah.
and it's
Girls
disastrous.
are taught that.
By the way, I love davening. I work on davening. I'm very into davening. And I come late to davening. You know why I come late to davening? Because I come late to everything. I was born late. Hopefully I'll die late. I don't know. It's just my okay, good. One time in our marriage, my wife said to me, maybe close the Gemara now and you'll be on time to Shachris. And she saw the look. It wasn't a look of death, but it was like, she never said it again. Why not?
She was afraid you were going to hit her.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's for a very different reason. Baruch Hashem, we have a great marriage. We're married 36 years now. I love my wife. My wife's not here to debate that point. But what I did, I'm a grown person. I don't want to tell you that I'm a grandfather now. It's even worse. But I know I should be on time to minyan. More than I beat myself up. I yell at myself. Hashem, what are you doing walking late? I berate myself regularly about it. So why don't I change? Whatever. I don't know why I don't, but it's a good question. But the point is, when she does that, how do you think it's received? So, not well. There's a word in the English language called criticism. And criticism is about the most disastrous thing you can do in any relationship. All this criticism does is creates a wedge, it distances people, and more than that, it never changes anyone. No one ever changes because of criticism. So my wife said it once and that was the end of it, but many women don't get the hint. And they say it again and again, and they nag and they chipper and they nag and they chipper and they nag, and eventually he's like, get out of my, you're a toothache. And why doesn't he love me? Why does he act nice? Well, try stop hurting him and maybe he'll.
What do the men do that are annoying to the women? What have
It
you
goes
done?
both ways.
Wait, I want to know. What have you done that your wife gave you a look and that was the end after one?
Oh, unfortunately, I wish I could say I'd stop, but you see, I am I'm gifted when it comes to being late, being sloppy, being messy, and my wife has to put up with that, and she's a tzaddikus. Now, I work on it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a creep. I work on it, but it is a real challenge because any two human beings have differences, and it is difficult for my wife to put up with that. And Baruch Hashem, I married well. I married very well. And she puts up with me for that. But it's not easy. And it's, but eventually she gave up on trying to change me. And that is one of the 10 really dumb mistakes that almost all couples make. Each tries to change the other. There's so much energy, resources, and effort trying to change the other, and it never works. But you know why it never works? It never works because invariably it's going to be my strength and my spouse's deficit that I need to change. Let's say it was the opposite. Let's say I was really on time and really neat. So that's the key to my success. I see it's a big, so out of goodness, I want to help my wife. I want to make her more efficient, more effective. So I try to coach her. I try to help her. But not just that. I see it as hurting her so much. So out of goodness, I can't help but try to change her. And it never crosses my mind that the reason why she's that way is because it's her temperament, it's her nature, it's her disposition. It's not going to change. So we all do this. Husbands, wives, we all do this. There's this incredible need to change each other. In fact, I have this expression, I think it's very valid, that we become experts at what our spouse does wrong. We become very attuned and very focused on it, and we can't help but notice it, and we point it out of goodness, and only out of, but it bodes very badly for the relationship, and it never ends well. So, that's a
good tip.
We'll be right back to this week's episode, but first, you've heard me talk about Relief before, but you've never heard me say this about them. They are epic. I mean, you've heard me say other words about them, how great they are, but I don't think I use the phrase they are epic. Relief is your one-stop shop if you are, for whatever reason, going through some form of mental health challenge and you don't know who to call, you call Relief. Their number is 718-431-9501, and they are so connected to all the best mental health professionals in the area, New York, New Jersey, Canada, wherever you are. It doesn't make a difference. You call them and they will connect you with the right mental health professional to get you through whatever challenge you're going through, whatever it is. Think of that, boom, that challenge you're thinking of, they're there. So you can also go on to their website if you don't really want to do a phone call, that's fine. You can go to reliefhelp.org. They'll hear you out. They'll understand what you're going through and connect you with the right person for you. You can also send them an email at info@reliefhelp.org. Relief is the place to go if you need anything mental health related. Now, back to this week's episode.
Could I give another thought as to why maybe spouses try to change each other? Because I think people do this with their kids also. Is people think that their spouse reflects on them. So they see them as one, which maybe isn't bad to see your spouse as one with you. That's a nice thing. But then whatever their spouse does, that reflects on you. So you want your spouse to look good, so you look good. I'm thinking, because I know people do this for their kids too, right? Like they'll criticize their kids and try to change their kids and all about the image of their kids because that reflects on their image. So I don't know, that's just a thought. Maybe I don't have any proof to it.
Yeah, I think with women especially, it comes even more from a maternal instinct, a desire to help. It's a woman is a caregiver, nurturer, and she wants to help her husband or a child, and this is the best way to help because it's and more than that, it's so easy to change. Because look, it's easy for me. So obviously, I see it in my own world. It's not difficult to be neat. It's not difficult to be on time. I see it myself. So why don't you just do that? Why don't you just adopt this way? And the idea that maybe it's easy for me because that's my temperament, my disposition, my nature, but not yours, never seems to cross the conscious mind.
What's another big mistake that you think people make?
What's another big mistake? So I'll give you an example. Here's two
of the top 10.
Of the top, only of the top 10. Okay, here we go. A young man and a young woman are walking down the street. As they're walking, he trips. She says, "Oy vey, are you okay? Are you all right?" Scene 1. Scene 2. Same young man, same young woman walking down the street. He trips. "Klutz, what's wrong with you? Can't you walk down the street?" What's the difference between scene 1 and scene 2?
Scene 1, she's faking it. Scene 2, she's saying the truth.
Scene 1, the chassan and kala. Scene 2, they're married already 3 years. Okay, now,
I mean, I think a lot more would happen than just 3 years passing to say something
there,
like that.
Done that.
Right.
Been there, done that. I cannot tell you how regularly I see couples say things to each other that makes my hair stand on end. Moshe, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard. Shiur, that's ridiculous, utterly stupid. How can you say something so dumb? But you guys like each other? You like?
Yeah, that.
So
I think
but wouldn't it get
name
there in a
calling,
progression? Meaning the person just doesn't
I think
start
name calling-
talking
Yes.
that way. It's probably
yes
slow.
and no. I'll tell you what
No?
happens. This is what I call the second of the 10 really dumb mistakes, not working on the respect in the marriage. You see, we become very familiar, very comfortable, and pretty quickly the pleases, the thank yous, the normal civilities are gone. And before you know it, we become very, very comfortable with each other. John Gottman, by the way, who's a marriage researcher,
Sure.
right? He's very, he has a study. He brings couples into his lab and he puts him in a chair, her in a chair, and he gives them 3 topics to discuss. What he's looking for is to see their relationship. As an aside, he does a side study where he asks the husband to speak to a woman who he's never seen before. He records that also, and he's measuring everything. He's videotaping it. He's measuring their heart rate, respiration. Then he swipes out he brings the wife back in and brings in a strange husband. So basically, he's looking to see how a couple speak to each other versus how they speak to strangers. Here's what he found. Invariably, with a couple of newly married or married many years, couples are far more polite to strangers than they are to their spouses. Worse yet, they'll much more quickly argue with their spouse than they will with an utter stranger. But even worse, if they do disagree, they're far more ready to accept a stranger's position and be open to it and polite than they are to their own spouse. And it seems to be a rule of thumb that we become comfortable, we let our hair down, and very quickly things devolve very quickly. So I think respect is something that needs to be worked on. If really dumb mistake number 1 is not working on the love in the marriage, again, with all due respect, really dumb mistake number 2 is not working on the respect in the marriage, because respect is vital. See, I can love you, but if I don't treat you with respect, it's going to be very hard for you to love me back. And more than that, the relationship just devolves and it gets very ugly quickly. So it's working on respect. And respect means, again, the civilities, the politeness, the way I'd speak to someone else, I should be at least as polite to my spouse. And it requires focus. It requires
That I liked. I mean, I absolutely agree with. And by the way, I agree with what you said before. I just a caveat.
from a Torah perspective.
That was all it is, right?
I hear you.
So what kind of tips would you give to a couple who you saw lost that respect? How would they gain it back?
So I say one of the best devices to break is your smartphone. However, there is one app on the smartphone that's worth using. That's a recorder. During dinner one day, leave the tape recorder on and listen afterwards. But don't listen to what your husband said wrong. Listen to yourself and ask yourself, am I as polite to my husband as I am to my friend? And again, this is, I don't mean to be funny over here, but you see the couple that, and the phone rings. Oh, hi. Yes, dear. Oh, great. Oh, yeah. Oh, so okay. Thank you so much. Okay. Bye-bye. Like, hey, wait, guys, like, so the phone is taping your own conversation and listening not to what your husband or your spouse, but listening to yourself. I think it's a very good eitzah.
I like that. So it's just being more conscious of it in itself will help you.
And it becomes a mirror. And the way I treat my spouse, invariably she's going to treat me. So if I treat her with disrespect, she's going to... I mean, let me be clear also. Because there are gender differences, respect often translates differently to men and to women. So there was a family member who I would leave the house when she would come in, because she was so helpful and like, lady, I know how to tie my shoes. Do me a favor. I'm not a kid. Like, men generally don't like it when women do things that, like, I got this. There's a certain way that women. Here, I'll give you a good for instance. A friend of yours is baking a cake, and she's using one method or one recipe, and you know a better way. What would you say?
You want me to give you my recipe?
Yeah, right. You'd offer, and your friend would receive it nicely because you mean it out of love, out of concern. And she, thank you very much. Walk over to a guy changing a tire and tell, hey, buddy, if you hold the wrench this way, it'll go quicker. What's going to be the result? You're asking for a fist fight. Men don't like unsolicited advice. Now, women do it, and it's okay, women to women. But when a woman offers her unsolicited advice to her husband, it's ill received. And she can't figure, why is he so touchy? Why does he get so edgy? So you have to realize your husband has a different emotional framework. And in a man's world, some things go and some things don't. So it's very important to recognize that the word respect isn't always treat them like you would your own gender. You have to respect them in a way. Again, you have to be attuned. You have to be alert. Just like, we talked about knowing the emotional world of your spouse. If your husband gets all edgy every time you say X, Y, and Z, maybe ask yourself, that's strange. Why? And you may find that a male ego is different the woman's ego without putting the male ego down necessarily. Maybe later
Don't worry,
we'll get to that.
deficit down.
No, yeshiva deficit. That's your
all good.
that's your problem.
There
Your
you go.
yeshiva deficit, right?
I went to YDT, so what's Yeshiva Deficit Torah? Yeah. So what about, you have any stories that you know that stood out for the audience, perhaps, that illustrate some of the things you said, and perhaps something that you did and that they learned from and then turned it around?
Stories we can go from today till tomorrow. Let's start with one. A fella comes over to me. I'm speaking at a Shabbaton, Shalom Bayis Shabbaton, interesting enough. And he says to me, Rabbi, you got to help me. You got to help me. What's the problem? My wife. Okay, what's up? Well, we got married, and she had our first kid. She put on some weight. She didn't lose that weight. She had our second kid. She put on some more weight, didn't lose that weight. Had our third kid, put on some more weight. She's now 40 pounds overweight. I'm a doctor. I work in the ER. I'm around these young, skinny nurses all day. I asked my wife to please work it. I offered a nutritionist. I offered her an exercise plan. I offered her, and she just won't do it. Rabbi, you got to help me. What could I do? How could I get her to change? Okay, so what did I say to him? I said to him, young man, you have a choice to make. You either embrace her as she is, or you suffer. I don't know of a woman who looks in the mirror and says, 40 pounds heavier than I used to be. Great, that's always what I wanted to be. So why doesn't she lose weight? You offer her a nutritionist, you offer her an exercise plan. Why doesn't she just lose the weight? And the answer is that right now there's too much on our plate, too much going on, and 3 kids might have a lot to do with it. But you either embrace her as she is, or you're going to suffer. And I think that story illustrates a very, very important point in any marriage. And that is, I guarantee your spouse is going to have stuff that bothers you, that annoys you, that just doesn't. And you have a choice to make. You either embrace her or him as they are, or you suffer, because they're not going to change. Whether it's the socks on the floor, whether it's the coming late, whether it's the whatever it may be. Now again, there's a balance, meaning my job is to do everything I can to make my spouse happy. My spouse's job it is to do everything in her power to accept me as I am. If we both do our job, things work out well. The problem is when we each go into the other's role, then it becomes very, very difficult. But understanding that, I guess that's a story. I think that's an important story.
What about where the woman comes to you?
Women are perfect. Women are perfect. It's all the guy's fault.
I'm saying that the guy's fault.
That is the guy's fault.
Meaning that was a story where the guy came to you complaining about his wife. So I'm saying, do you have a story the reverse way?
Yeah. So that story I use as one of my pin stories, because you see, I get the call from a woman. Rabbi, what do I do with this guy? He's 40 years old and he leaves his socks on the floor. I yell at him, I scream, and he still leaves his socks on the floor. What's wrong with the guy? You ever hear that kind of thing? Not you, but I'm saying, okay. So what do you say to a woman who says to you, he's 40 years old and he leaves his socks on the floor? So what I said to her was, I asked her the following question. I said, madam, let me ask you a very important question. Is he a nice guy? Is he a nice guy? Yeah. Is he considerate? Yeah.
Well, not enough. He leaves his socks on the floor.
Okay. But does he love you? Yes. So why does he do it? That's exactly what I'm asking. What's wrong with the guy? I said to him, I'd like to explain to you why he does it. He is like you and I, a human being with many strengths, many talents, and also with some stuff, some flaws. And you either learn, and exactly I use this line, you either embrace him as he is, or you suffer. Should he work on it? I'm sure he is. But if you screamed at him 10,000 times, he hasn't changed yet, he's not going to change. And recognizing that different people have different stuff, they have different temperaments, different natures, and accepting that and not needing to change them is the key to a successful marriage. Now, by the way, this story became part of my my signature, because I knew this. I was speaking in Chicago, and actually to women, and one woman after the class raised her hand and said, Rabbi, do you remember you were here 2 years ago? I said, I do. She said, do you remember what you spoke about? I said, I don't. She said, you told that socks on the floor story, and it changed my marriage. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, in my case, my husband would come home Sunday night, take off his jacket, leave it on the dining room chair. Monday night, he's wearing a different suit, leave that one on the dining room chair. Tuesday night, another one. By Thursday night, his wardrobe was all over the dining room.
I do that. Yeah.
So
first of all, that's where jackets go.
That's where they belong. Okay,
that is where they belong.
Okay, so now, I
especially Friday night.
I see there's a nod on the other side. Okay, so one second.
Yep. Do I tell you to put it away?
No, because that's where they belong.
I just put away myself.
No, I put them away next Shabbos.
Next Shabbos. So wait, you got to hear the punchline. So the punchline is, and so I asked her what used to happen. I used to scream and yell at him. How was your shalom bayis? Bad. So what happened? She said, well, you told the socks on the floor story. Now Sunday night he puts his jacket on the chair. I take it upstairs. Monday night, the other jacket, I take it upstairs. How's your shalom bayis now? It's beautiful. I asked the women in that class to stand up and clap because she got it right. So
what happens when you feel the financial stress issue in a marriage?
Right.
Like, how do you deal with that?
That's a very good,
That's
very important
a
point.
great question.
Right. So
Let's say either spouse comes in saying,
right,
my spouse isn't making enough money or isn't pulling their weight,
So there are a few different angles.
I was
going to
ask different, like meaning if when one is, let's say, spending too much.
Right. Okay. So
Right.
I mean,
yeah. Well, it's a very different question. Let's deal with the spending question first. So I think there's only one way that a couple can ever deal with that, and that's something that none of us do, but is essential. And that's called making a budget. You see, making a budget means,
and for that, listen to Kosher Money.
Kosher Money, right. There's a plug for the right. But you see, but I have one more nuance to that. When there's a budget, so this is the amount of money we have, and we're going to spend on this and this. And so it's not me saying you can't spend, or not me saying that we have to spend on this. We, as a couple, make a decision. These are our limited resources. How are we going to allocate it? Now, the reason why a budget is very difficult is because it's not fun at all. So I have a very simple way to make a budget fun. Part of the budget, the first 10% of the budget goes to Meiser, the next 10% to savings, and literally to savings, and 80%, whatever's left, we live on. When you do it that way, then it's like, cool, wow, we save money. I've seen women who were spenders like crazy, who suddenly changed radically because they start seeing the bank account growing and there's money in the account, and it's like, wow, that's cool. So I think if you add a little bit of that, so it becomes.
That assumes that you have enough money to save.
No one has enough money to save,
uh-huh.
and no one has enough money to give Meiser either.
Uh-huh.
But that's the key. You give Meiser first, put 10% in savings, and whatever's left, you figure out how to live on. We all live above our means. That's the American dream, the American society, and it almost doesn't matter how much money you make because you make more, you spend more, make more, spend more. Just So I think this is the only way to be financially prudent. The only way to be sober about finances. You have to sit as a couple, budget the 80%. What are we going to spend? I'm going to spend this amount of money on clothing, this amount on vacation, whatever that, and then as a unit you make this decision. So then it's not me telling you or you telling me. We made a decision, and then it's when your wife, your husband overspends, you kind of have to look away. But you have hopefully basic approach.
And when it comes to making enough money, I'm sure that is a huge piece of contention in a marriage.
It is because we live in a very competitive society, and one of the objects of competition is the clothing you wear, the house you live in, the car you drive. And it's a magefa. It's a horrible, horrible disease state. It's a real problem.
Any stories that you could share?
No, not a single one that I want to share.
Oh.
I'm sorry, because they're all, in other words.
Some of the stories that are tougher to hear, though.
Meaning because they don't end well?
Yeah.
Or?
Right, but that's
not always.
too.
I wouldn't say they always don't end well, but you see, in other words, that in and of itself is part of maturation is recognizing that the outside doesn't define me. B, people don't care anyway. I made the biggest bar mitzvah in the world ever. People don't care anyway. No one's really looking. No one, But there's a real maturity that has to come, and it only comes with time, and it only comes with, with growing. But you see, the other problem is when one or the other is not either they're not financially prudent, they're real spenders, or they're not earning because they're lazy. That's a real problem, and that I don't have a good answer to that one. That's a real problem.
Well, let's say they're
Isn't
not.
that stump the rabbi? Oh no, stump.
No, but let's say they're not earning. Isn't that like the number? They're lazy though.
No.
Meaning, let's say they're not earning. They're putting in a lot of effort and not earning.
Can I point out one thing?
I guess that's different.
There's only one cause of divorce in America today. It's not finances, not kids, not religion, not in-laws. Only one cause: fighting. Oh yeah, but it's fighting about the money or the religion and the kid. Never. It's never the issue, and I'll prove it to you. 70% of successful marriages have at least one irreconcilable difference. An irreconcilable difference means a difference that can't be reconciled. So he has a successful business in New York. She has severe allergies and needs to live in San Diego. Chicago doesn't cut it for either one. He wants to bring the kids up in a Hasidic way. She wants a Litvish way. You can't send them to yeshiva with long curly payas on one side. An irreconcilable difference means there is no reconciliation. 70% of successful marriages have at least one irreconcilable difference, but they're successful. Why? Because my way, your way, we find a way. As long as we're working together, as long as there's love and respect in the marriage, it's never the issue. It's how the couple deals with the issue. So finances are a big deal. I'm not saying they're not. But everything's a big deal. The toilet paper is a big deal.
I have to respectfully disagree.
Right. So
because the unreconcilable difference could be something less impactful, right? We could have an unreconcilable difference about where we like going out to eat. I like X.
No, how about I want to live in Israel and she doesn't?
70% are unreconcilable that are material to the marriage.
I don't know. I want
Because
to live in
the examples you're giving
my
are like,
Are you saying where you live, where your kids go to school?
my life is Israel. I had a guy for 45 years wanted to live in Israel, and his wife didn't want to. For 45 years, they're married. For 45 years, he's been, let's make Aliyah, and she didn't want to. That's an irreconcilable difference. You can't live half there. You can't live like,
right, they had
South
a happy
America.
marriage. You're saying 70% of marriages have something like as material like that.
But I have only one important point to make. I shared your perspective as well until I dealt with hundreds and hundreds of couples. And there's a certain experience that when you see it again and again and again, you begin to realize that marriage is not what, everyone, listen, I knew everything there was to know about marriage, then I got married, and it's not a joke because I was the world's expert on marriage, and then I got married and I realized I knew nothing. But I really didn't realize how little I knew until you start dealing with couples and they're quibbling and they're fighting, and you got to figure out what's the issue and what's going on. You quickly see there's it's a very different perspective and a very different, I don't know. Okay.
No,
so it's not the fight. It's not the content of the fight. It's how they fight
right.
and how they're able to make up and
it's never the issue. It's how they deal with the issue.
Interesting. But you don't like if you would Google.
And I'm sorry to interrupt what I'm saying. And
yeah,
therefore,
sure.
what the key is the relationship.
Right.
You see, if it's the issue,
then it's back to getting the flowers.
Back to right. And whose responsibility?
The husband.
The husband's responsible to romance his wife.
Right.
The women have their own responsibilities. We'll get to those hopefully shortly. Number one, don't change your husband. That's number one. Number one, don't change him. That's number one. I'm getting a smile over there.
No. I'm just trying to. Yeah, and then number two.
No, that's it.
That's number one.
Gentlemen, but if I could change two things, it would be, gentlemen, it's your responsibility to romance your wife. Ladies, don't change them. Those two things change, and many, many times that alone makes a dramatic difference, seismic shift in the marriage.
Right. So, if you would Google, 10 reasons why people get divorced, I think, or have challenging marital.
Yes.
Number two is finances or something.
Well, is it the finances that made them get divorced, or is it their fights over the finances that made them get divorced?
There's a lot of, can I say this politely?
Yeah, sure.
There's a lot of stupidity in the world. And what I mean by that is, if you don't understand what a relationship needs, I can't tell how many times guys say to me things like, she's so irrational. Nothing I do makes her happy. I do everything for her. And it's true. He works, he does it, and she's never happy. But he's not meeting her core needs. And if you don't meet her core needs, she's going to be miserable. But I do everything. I had a woman, by the way, just recently, I had a woman write to me like this. Her husband, not only does he takes care of the kids, he cooks for Shabbos, he brings the kids to the babysitter, he does everything. And I don't know why, but I always criticize him. I just feel he's not meeting my needs. And like just reading the email, I knew exactly what was going on.
And what do you think was it?
I'll tell you exactly what it is, because I've seen it so many times. A guy is a good guy, and he loves his wife, so he does everything for his wife. He takes care of the kids, and he cleans up, and he cooks the Shabbos, and he's doing it for his wife, and he really is. And there's only one problem. He's telling his wife in his language that he cares for her, but the language that she needs to hear things in, he's not speaking. She needs the care and the affection and the kind words and the flowers and the gifts or whatever. But he's not meeting her core needs. So you could be the most responsible citizen in the world, and you could take care of the kids, and you can earn a great living, and you could do everything. But if your wife doesn't feel that she's cherished, if she doesn't feel she's number one, if she doesn't feel that you deeply emotionally are connected to her, she's going to be miserable. So a guy like that comes to me with a complaint. She's irrational. She's unreasonable. I've done everything for her, and it's clear that she's irrational. And ostensibly, it looks like he's right. And if you don't understand the needs of a woman, if you don't understand the needs of marriage, you'd conclude that obviously she's nuts. She's a narcissist, or she's whatever. You give her some label. Until you recognize he's not meeting a core need. She needs to be cherished. By the way, Stipler in Igeris, he writes in Igeris, if a woman doesn't feel that her husband cherishes her, it's close to pikuach nefesh. Like it's a danger to her life. Why? A woman at the core of her essence needs to be loved. She needs to be cherished. That's an emotional need. So if you meet every other need but that, guess what? She's going to be miserable. But it doesn't make sense because I met all of her needs. I made her a good living and I took care of the kids. Yeah, but so what I mean by that is that a lot of times people miss the obvious because they don't understand the relationship. I don't understand what's going on. So if you Google and you find that the 10 reasons for marriage are, whether it be money or finances, with all due respect, try ChatGPT maybe, or try, Google's gone. It's like, but,
Got it.
It's interesting.
I said you were.
I wouldn't want to hear if there's an agreement here.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. Yes.
But
I don't, because
isn't
it's
she-
not the money. Meaning that how many people who have $0 and
Right.
they're living very poorly and they love each other and stay married.
Oh my
right? So
goodness,
meaning
I
it's
just
not
dealt with a young
it's not the
couple.
amount of money that you have.
A
It's
young couple
you're
with
fighting
one
over it.
kid. He was making $850,000 a year. And if I would tell you the fights, the scream, oh my good, but money clearly wasn't an issue there. He was, a young couple, they're living in an apartment. He's got enough. I think he's got enough there to hopefully. So money is not the end. Don't get me wrong. Finances are an issue. Like many things are an issue.
Well, it causes more stress. Meaning
Right.
the finances cause the stress, and then the stress cause you to not be on your best behavior, whatever it is.
Right.
Meaning to not put the effort into communicating properly. So
There are many stresses
it's
in life.
indirectly causing the divorce. It's not direct,
Mm-hmm.
right? As is any meaning stress with kids or stress with.
By the way-
A medical issue could cause
Right.
stress. There's so many things that could be.
And by
That's
the way,
not
the
what
biggest-
it is, though. It's not the medical issue causes divorce. It's the medical issue causes the stress, which causes the fighting, which then causes the divorce.
I want to say something radical now. You're not going to be happy with this one.
Let's go.
One of the biggest causes of shalom bayis problems are kids.
I believe
Because
that.
kids require attention. Kids demand, they have needs, and they get in. And I'm a firm believer in boundaries. I'm a firm believer that a couple have to set boundaries. This is mommy and daddy's night out. There are locks on the bedroom. There are rules. There are boundaries. There are certain very real. I once spoke in a Saudi, in a Bukharian community about the idea of putting locks on the bedroom door. The ladies were up in arms. What? What are you crazy? They're 6. How can they not come into my bed? Not 6 months, 6 years. 6 years old. How can I not come into in my bed at night? Like, lady. Okay, so I'm
a lot of people do that. Just saying.
So
Yeah.
I'll do a plug for the the infant sleep consultants. My daughter has. I'm not going to do a plug here, but Baby Sleep Maven. She.
Oh, that's your daughter?
Yeah.
Oh, very nice.
Pediatric sleep consultant. She's great. The guys who give me hugs and your daughter saved my life. My kid couldn't go to sleep, and now So yeah, get some pediatric sleep consultants, and but the bottom line is boundaries mean that you see. I'd say more than that. The best investment you can make in your children being wholesome, happy kids is your marriage. The single best investment you can make in your children being wholesome, happy people is your marriage. And I say that to women especially because women, a lot of times, they don't want to go out. How can I go out? My Rachi is not going to do all her homework, and David is not going to know his Chumash. So I guarantee if Rachi doesn't know every Ramban and Chumash, or David doesn't know his math, they'll define. But if the marriage starts disintegrating, so all bets are off, especially when the kids are little. You guys are 10 feet tall. You're the center of gravity. If you start quibbling, you start bickering, so everything itself, gravity might as well not pull anymore. Who knows what's going to be? Their entire frame of reference, the essence of their home is starting to crumble. So probably the single best investment you can make in your children's emotional health and their well-development is working on the marriage. And that means boundaries. It means going out. That means time. There's mommy and daddy time, and there's time we spend as a couple. And that means understanding that this is an important part of a successful family, and it's the best investment you can make in your children.
Love that. I want to ask you a question on a different topic, which is when have couples come to you that you've then told them to go to a mental health professional versus a rev?
Okay, so on a regular basis, I have that. You know, there's an important line to remember. Marriage is an institution, but it's not a hospital. If you have two unwell people and you get them married to each other, marriage doesn't solve any emotional, psychological problems. It only exacerbates them, because now it's my depression that's going to be reflected in the relationship with my OCD or whatever it may. So on a regular basis, there's no question. On a regular basis, I send couples. Many times I'll say to a couple, you don't have a marriage problem. You have a he problem or she problem. It's an emotional, psychological. You have to deal with that. Now, obviously, it's going to reflect in the relationship and it's going to damage the marriage, but it's not a marital problem. It's a you problem. So in that case, for sure, I send couples regularly to get help. And there's a lot of resources now, Baruch Hashem, for dealing with issues, whether it be anxiety, whether it be depression, whether it be OCD, whether it be any of the common things that we see. I'm a lot quicker to refer someone for that than I am to marriage therapists, because that's a real sticky, unfortunately. Now, I can't necessarily blame the marriage therapist, because people end up going to marriage therapists way, way too late in the game. I think they say 6 years after the problems really become serious, that's when the average couple will go to a marriage therapist. So I can't blame the marriage therapist necessarily, because they're dealing with stuff when there's a lot of water under the bridge. But I found it very, very rare that a marriage therapist has done a lot of significant changes, in a marriage. So, but I do refer then also, because there are many times when things are clearly not
working with the Rav.
Not working right.
Wow. You mentioned you said you wanted to bring up for the men, and then you said for the women, and then you didn't. I feel like you want to perhaps address that.
What does your wife do wrong?
No, I think you were saying the thing to take away.
No, that's it. To me, it's simple. Gentlemen, you're responsible to romance your wife.
Right.
Ladies, don't change them. Those two things, and life is great. Life is great.
Right. And don't criticize.
Right.
Set aside time.
Yeah.
Right. I'm trying to summarize all the points that you made.
Right. You have to go out once a week, not once a yovel, not once a shemitah. Once a week, you go out as a couple. You go out, you bond, you spend time, you connect. That's it. Recognizing that you have to work on the respect in the marriage. You have to recognize that my emotional world is not my spouse's. The way I experience things is the way I experience things. It doesn't define reality. So the words, that's strange, saying the words to yourself, that's strange. Why would my wife react that way? Why is she getting so bent out of shape? And you open yourself up to the scientific curiosity. It's then trying to understand this person. Why would she react that way? Why would he get so bothered by that? That is a huge piece, because we all create these images. The way I do things is normal. The way I do things is right, and my spouse is wrong. So
that was a great recap.
Right. So that's really the work that you're talking about, meaning the working on the marriage. Like, what is the work? That's the work. Meaning to really try and understand where the other person is coming from. Work on understanding the other person, and learning to adjust to another human being. In other words, learning to get comfortable with different ways of doing things and different approaches, and learning that my way is one way, but not the only way, and not changing my spouse. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. This is so fun.
Thank you so much for watching or listening to this week's episode. If you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and give us the code word. The rabbi is awesome. Code words, I should say. The rabbi is awesome. Share this episode with any couple that you think could use it. I think there's going to be, couples that in their low 20s, and I think couples in their high 80s that will gain some piece of knowledge or advice that they really didn't have before. Honestly, I was listening to this episode because in the editing process, I'm listening to it, and I was actually cleaning my house, but I was so distracted, I stopped cleaning. I just sat on my couch and just listened, which for me is not something I typically do. I can't really I typically multitask, but I really want to like hear exactly what he's saying. I didn't take notes. I probably should have taken notes. I'll re-listen to it. So go ahead and share this episode with someone that you think it could help their marriage out. And again, if you need help, you could call Relief. They are the best number to call if you need to find the right psychologist or mental health professional near you. Thank you so much for watching or listening to this week's episode. Stay safe. Living L'chaim.